I've got some great news. Barcelona might be leaving the Formula One calendar to be replaced by a street circuit in Madrid. God damn it! Alright, so the rumoured street circuit coming to Madrid hasn't been much of a secret. More like an open secret. It's been talked about quite a bit for the past few months, really, but it's been heating up in the past few weeks. A lot more information's been coming out about it, but only today has it been officially confirmed with a live presentation from IFEMA in Madrid. IFEMA is a consortium formed by the Community of Madrid and the Madrid City Council. They essentially hold events, or at least that's how I understood it. So let's talk about the circuit first. This is the layout. It's 5.47 kilometers in length with 20 corners and an average speed of 218 kilometers per hour. As you can see from the layout, the circuit is going to be a quick one. The circuit starts around the IFEMA complex, which is large, with the pit straight running alongside the back of the complex. That IFEMA complex there is going to house all of the pit facilities, as well as all the official offices for all the teams and what have you, and the media. Then you head down the Ribera del Sena to the Tunnel de Valdebebas. I apologize, all Spanish speakers. With a sweeping section around Curva de Valdebebas. Listen, it's hard, okay? Now that's an urban development in Madrid. Then the next part of the circuit seems a bit slower and more technical. My main issue just looking at the track layout is I'm struggling to see the best places for overtaking. This is more often than not the problem with street circuits. They're not designed from scratch to be a good track for racing and overtaking. They're often constrained to the roads that they have to work within. We're always compromised with street circuits, even if we don't realize it. And we do have a couple of good street circuits on the calendar, but there's always some sort of compromise. We would need to see a full lap to truly judge the circuit, but the layout isn't filling me with confidence at the minute. Sadly, it feels like we've got to embrace this new era of Formula One where they're destined. It's street circuits, it's city circuits with Las Vegas, Spain, Madrid now, and there was even rumours of a London Grand Prix as well. Formula E is actually trying to move away from city circuits and go on to more normal circuits like track circuits, whereas Formula One is doing the opposite. Before you know it, the majority of circuits are going to be street circuits, and the old heritage circuits, the real circuits, are going to be no more if we carry on going this way. Oh, and the Madrid circuit has been signed for 10 years. That's right, Formula One will have its first race in 2026, and the circuit will stay on the calendar for 10 years. The circuit will only be 16 kilometers from the center of Madrid and only 5 minutes away from the airport, making it arguably the most accessible circuit on the calendar. And the track itself will be half temporary, half permanent. It wouldn't be the first time F1 has raced in Madrid though. F1 has previously raced at the Circuito de Jarama. I've probably butchered that name. The last time being in 1981, with that circuit being just north of Madrid. In fact, there is a big deal being made out of the fact that Formula One is coming back to Madrid after 40 years. So what does this mean for the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona? Well, first things first, this race in Madrid is being labelled as a Spanish Grand Prix. That's the first thing to consider. The circuit at Catalunya is contracted until 2026. It actually has had a few single-year contracts recently, but it's just had one until 2026. But this new race in the heart of Madrid is attempting to be that crown jewel in Spanish racing. They're making a really big deal out of it, 40 years back to Madrid. And it could spell the end for Barcelona because it's not really a fan favourite anymore. It would mean that there is a good potential that the circuit could drop off the calendar in 2026 when the contract expires, but that's not guaranteed. The rumour is that Barcelona wants to fight for its place and it wants to remain on the calendar. Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya was built in 1991 and we've been racing there ever since. Over recent years, the circuit has been known for, well, bland races and a lack of overtaking. But if we head back to the early 90s, overtaking was frequent as cars could actually follow through the last few corners and then use slipstream down the long straight. Modern cars, though, with their increased downforce, made following through the last sector more difficult. Of course, last year, F1 used the modified version of the circuit, which eliminated that last chicane, much to everyone's approval, but even then it still looks like Catalunya is on the chopping block. Barcelona is a track everyone was familiar with, because it's also where pre-season testing took place before a new season kicked off. But that is no longer the case. Pre-season testing these days tends to happen in Bahrain a week before the season begins, at the same circuit. It wasn't always the only Spanish Grand Prix on the calendar, though. Do you remember Valencia? Another street circuit. Valencia was held for 5 years between 2008 and 2012, but it was labelled as the European Grand Prix, so it wasn't confused with the official Spanish Grand Prix at Catalunya. It wasn't particularly well received, though, with the circuit not being good for overtaking. And eventually the circuit was left abandoned when a deal fell through to alternate between the circuit at Valencia and the circuit at Catalunya. It's probably worth talking about these current generation of cars as well, because they're the least suited to the types of circuits, especially compared with their predecessors. As we know, the current generation of cars rely heavily on being low to the ground, around about 60 millimeters. The older cars, their predecessors, were around 120 to 140, depending on the rake of the car. As we know, Red Bull ran quite a high rake. But ultimately as well, the suspension is very stiff, they're low and they're stiff, and that makes them very uncomfortable over bumps, as Lewis Hamilton will attest to from Baku. On most normal circuits, this is fine, because they tend to be smooth. But on street circuits, especially parts of the circuit which have cars running on them, normal cars for most of the year, they tend to be bumpy. And because of that, these cars need to be set up accordingly to accommodate for the bumps, which ultimately will take away performance. James Allison recently criticised these new regulations in an interview for restricting engineers on how they could optimally set the cars up. These are all cars that are setting off in the 60 millimeters. There might be a few millimeters of difference between them, but they are all just on the ground. It's going to test the end of the straight failure. It's going to need to stay strong in the fast corners, and it's hard to persuade the car to do all of those things with a set of rules that basically don't want anything except to be near to the ground. Speaking of James Allison, both he and Toto Wolff have signed new contracts at Mercedes. I'm sure this will come as good news to all Mercedes fans, but I also get the feeling that Toto Wolff has some unfinished business in getting Hamilton to his 8th title. That's going to be no easy feat, though. So what do we make of this new circuit in Madrid? I'm on the fence. It's another street circuit. I'm not a fan of most of them, especially some of the new ones. We'll just have to see how it pans out. I won't necessarily miss Barcelona if it drops off the calendar, but I just wish it was replaced with a more normal circuit rather than another street circuit. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.